Up to 65% of productive land is degraded in Africa, while desertification affects 45% of the continent's land area. Deforestation continues to increase with the loss of 4 million hectares of forest per year, mainly in the last 30 years. For African countries, the consequences of desertification and land degradation are drought, sandstorm, food insecurity, migration, poverty, etc. It is therefore urgent to act. This is a message sent by the organizers of the COP15, the 15th Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification and Drought, organized in the Ivorian economic capital Abidjan in May 2022.
La désertification et la sécheresse.
Desertification and drought are sources of migration and inter-community conflicts due to the competition for diminishing natural resources. Under these conditions, it is essential to adopt policies that support the resilience of populations, especially the most vulnerable ones. Our people have high hopes for us. We have no right to disappoint them. Let us act quickly. Let us act together to give new life to our lands.
A platform for formal discussions on the future of the Earth, the COP15 brings together political leaders, UN agencies, technical and financial partners, the private sector, the civil society, in order to lay the foundations for a global partnership to combat desertification and deforestation. Present at this meeting in Abidjan, the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, is working with all stakeholders to achieve the objectives of sustainable management of natural resources, climate adaptation, preservation and restoration of land.
COP15 is one of the 3 global meetings that are going to determine the future of the planet and land degradation and climate change in the world going forward. Well, one of the main issues around any sort of international initiative like this is finance. The commitments that are estimated for this whole initiative are between 300 billion and 1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. That's a large number, and that's a big challenge to achieve. So I think that we have to bring the international community together, international donors, private sector, other financiers, to address the issues of land management, land degradation and restoration. In addition, there's a lot of money being injected into pandemic recovery, and I think we have a real chance to use those funds and other funds to achieve the goals on desertification and land degradation. UNDP supports not only raising finance and partnerships, but in providing innovative solutions to solve the problems posed by these issues.
While environmental degradation has serious consequences for all human beings, it particularly affects women who are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change. The panel on gender organized within the framework of this COP15 has allowed to position the gender issue at the center of the debates related to climate change and desertification, and especially to accelerate the equitable access of women to financial and land resources. Our expectations are that 3 important questions be answered. First, women's rights, as we talked a lot about land rights. We also talked about representativeness, so how to ensure that women are at the table of the global governance of the climate, and of course, the empowerment. Women have asked to be taken out of microfinance ghettos. They want much larger climate finance scopes.
Women are the stewards of land globally. Women make up 43% of the agricultural labor force around the world. However, most women do not get the same resources that men do. Women get only 15% of agricultural extension services and only 10% of agricultural credit, for example, in Africa. What we are doing in UNDP is working with 125 countries to intentionally look and support women in the agricultural sector, in agricultural extension, and in receiving agricultural credit.
In Côte d'Ivoire, one of the pillars of UNDP's work is technological innovation as a solution to sustainable development challenges. The pole of entrepreneurial innovation erected within the Technical High School of Abidjan has been equipped by UNDP to the tune of 200 million CFA francs. This high-tech infrastructure, inaugurated in parallel with COP15, is intended to promote entrepreneurial innovation and the socio-economic inclusion of youth and women through competitive, innovative, and job-creating SMEs.
For me, this day marks the concrete materialization of this project, and I have hope that in the coming days we will be able to accelerate so that the maximum number of young people in our country can benefit from these facilities, but most importantly, from financial support. As the young entrepreneurs who spoke earlier said, the challenge they face today is generally less about ideas, less about projects, than often about training and access to financing. And I think that this framework comes to solve this problem that the young entrepreneurs are facing.
The sharing of experiences, the promotion of good practices, and innovation are the axes of intervention of the UNDP at this 15th section of the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, COP15. The UNDP Associate Administrator visited the Alassane Ouattara High School of Excellence in Grand Bassam, some 40 kilometers away of the Ivorian economic capital. This school and community are at the forefront of innovation and environmental preservation, with the implementation of a project for the management and treatment of waste and wastewater. This project, designed by the students of the high school, is the result of the youth conferences initiated by the Grand Bassam City Council on the theme of climate and environment.
La ville est dotée d'un agenda 21 et nous mettons en œuvre une série d'actions.
The city has an Agenda 21 and we're implementing a series of actions that fit into that vision. We wanted to initiate a dialogue with the youth on environmental issues through the youth conferences that took place a month ago in the presence of the UNDP representative. And I am happy about the positive outcome that today she has come back alongside with the Associate Administrator of the UNDP to take into account the recommendations and concrete proposals made by the youth, and that we have prospects for the implementation of this project through the laboratory set by the UNDP to be able to support projects in the field of environment and sustainable development.
Soutenir les projets innovants en matière d'environnement de développement durable.
With 90% of the forest surface having disappeared in the last 60 years, Côte d'Ivoire has one of the highest deforestation rates in Africa. Committed to the Ivorian government, UNDP has undertaken several initiatives to mobilize resources to find solutions to the challenges of sustainable land and forest management.
Dans la deuxième phase du programme social du gouvernement, avec le premier pilier,
in the second phase of the government's social program, with the first pillar dealing with fragility in the northern region, the UNDP has already mobilized, through our partner Germany, about 4 million euros. This will enable us to support this fight against fragility. We are in discussions with other partners. The government has expressed its appreciation that we have a certain agility and speed in responding to current priorities. Beyond that, the government also wanted UNDP to scale up and strengthen our contribution in the area of governance, especially the governance of institutions, so that they are stronger and more transparent, but also that we can strengthen our support in what relates to the employability of youth and young women in particular.
L'employabilité des jeunes et des jeunes femmes en particulier.
The United Nations Development Programme remains true to its core mission of fighting poverty and supporting sustainable development. a mission that the UNDP Associate Administrator affirmed on the occasion of the Private Sector Day, a forum organized by the General Confederation of Enterprises of Côte d'Ivoire in the framework of the COP15 in Abidjan. Côte d'Ivoire has embarked on an ambitious plan for economic and social transformation by 2030, and UNDP is a key ally in achieving the goals.
The action of the UNDP in Côte d'Ivoire has already allowed to establish important advances with the private sector, aiming in particular at the reinforcement of the corporate social responsibility, the humanitarian platform of the private sector, and the contribution of the private sector to the social, human, economic development of the country. Your presence among us, Madam Administrator, gives us hope that we can accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Objectives, in which the private sector plays a central role.
Depletion of water resources, land degradation, deforestation, intensive agriculture is often cited for its role in accelerating desertification. As the world's largest producer of cocoa and cashew nuts and the fifth largest producer of palm oil, Côte d'Ivoire is committed to promoting the new agricultural practices that are more sustainable and less harmful to the environment.
Organic cocoa is cocoa with zero synthetic pesticides. So, we work with agronomic methods like biological methods, since we use insects to fight against some other insects. So, as an insecticide, we manufacture ourselves 40 to 50% of the biopesticides that we use on the plantation. We make our biocompost as well. The objective is to increase the productivity in the state rather than to do extensive farming, because extensive farming will eventually destroy protected areas and others. But the objective of what we're doing today is to increase production, because the oil palm producers in Côte d'Ivoire, their productivity is around 5 hectares only, whereas the plant material makes 20 tons per hectare. All we have to do is to cultivate good agricultural practices and to put a little goodwill so that we can pass from 5 to 10 tons per hectare.
The objective of the COP15 organizers is to pay particular attention to the restoration of 1 billion hectares of degraded land by 2030, the sustainability of land use in the face of the impacts of climate change, and the fight against the increase of environmental risks.
The level of land degradation can have a very heavy impact on our health as well. So land is really one of the major topics of this COP. The second topic, which is also related, is drought. The world is experiencing more and more frequent and more violent droughts. We also produced a second report on droughts, which showed that in the last 20 years, the number and frequency of droughts has increased by 29% just in 20 years. Of course, there is climate change. It is climate phenomena. Of course, droughts have always existed in the past, since pharaohs or even before. But they were not so frequent and not so brutal.
The various stakeholders at COP15 thus committed themselves to putting in place effective instruments for measuring and monitoring decisions for the effective implementation of the Abidjan initiative. According to the UN, 70% of the planet's land surface has been transformed by human activities. If nothing is done by 2050, 16 million kilometers square of land will disappear, an area equivalent to that of South America.